Criminal. Just sit with that word for a second. Criminal. What did you picture? Be honest with yourself. Did you see a face, a body type? Maybe you saw a neighborhood. Did you see a border? Now ask yourself, why? Who taught you to associate that image with that word? For those of you who've been following my Ideograph series, you already know where I'm going. For those of you who are new, welcome. An ideograph is a term coined by the rhetorician Michael McGee in 1980. It's a word that functions as a warrant for political action, even though nobody agrees on what it actually means. Words like freedom, justice, sin. Today's word is criminal. And I'm going to show you how that single word is used to erase human beings, not by accident, but by design. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another won Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio as a washed-up ex-revolutionary trying to raise his biracial teenage daughter. Sean Penn plays Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, a corrupt military officer who runs immigration detention operations on the southern border. There's a scene in this film I need you to see, not with your eyes, but with your ears. Because what Anderson does here is one of the most devastating pieces of political filmmaking I've ever encountered. In the middle of the film, we see Sensei Sergio St. Carlos, played by Benicio del Toro. He runs a martial arts center and quietly, without fanfare, he has built a sanctuary. He's sheltering undocumented families in a place called Baktan Cross. He doesn't make speeches about it. He describes what he is doing in code. He says he's involved in a Latino Harriet Tubman situation. That phrase alone compresses 2 centuries of American racial violence into 5 words, but we'll come back to that. What Anderson shows us, what the camera lingers on, are the people Sergio is protecting. Women, children, families eating meals together, human beings who are being fed and housed by a community that has chosen to see them as people. I've lived in a place like that. When I completed a 6-week internship in Washington, D.C., I did handyman work in exchange for a bedroom at the Dorothy Day House, which existed primarily as protection for undocumented mothers fleeing political violence and domestic violence in a country where the law would create more problems for them instead of keeping them safe. Hold that image in your mind, those faces, those children. Now, Anderson in the movie cuts to the Christmas Adventurers Club. That's the almost Monty Python-esque name of the secret society in the film, a fraternity of wealthy white supremacists. And listen to how they describe the exact same people we saw at Sergio's. Quote, "He runs an underground railroad bringing illegals from our southern border, giving jobs and housing to drug dealers and psychopaths. He's a reefer addict." And then Colonel Lockjaw briefs his troops for the military's raid. "This is a sanctuary city for thousands of wet bodies. We expect the local populace to be sympathetic and supportive to the criminal organizations we are targeting tonight, gentlemen." Women and children on one side, drug dealers and psychopaths on the other side, the same human beings, 2 completely different realities separated by a single word, criminals. And here's the part that makes it almost Monty Python again. In the same meeting, one of the Christmas adventurers complains that the raid is going to disrupt Brother Bert Rimhorn's chicken farm because, and I quote, "he wants his wetbacks back to work." So within the same conversation, the same people are simultaneously criminals who must be exterminated and labor that must be exploited. The sign contradicts itself within the same breath, and nobody at that table notices or cares because they're not describing reality. They're performing ideology. Let me name what just happened. The word criminal in that scene has nothing to do with anyone committing a crime. It is a categorization of bodies. Those women and children haven't broken any natural law. They've crossed a line that was drawn by the same power structure that profits from their existence on the other side of that line. This is what happens when an ideograph completely detaches itself from its referent. Criminal no longer describes an action someone has taken. It describes a person the state has decided exists outside its protection. The comedy of it, and it is comedy, even though it's horrifying, comes from the absolute refusal of the speaker to see what's plainly visible. Those men in the Christmas Adventurers Club aren't lying in the conventional sense. They genuinely see criminals. The word has replaced their capacity to see human beings. It has consumed reality and replaced it with a label. Think about what that means. Anderson shows you women and children. Then he shows you men planning a military assault on those women and children. And the men truly believe, that they are the heroes here, because the word criminal has done the work for them. It has pre-decided who is human and who is not. All that is left is the operation. Quote, expect the local populace to be sympathetic to the criminals. Translation, anyone who sees these people as human beings is part of the problem. Now I need you to pull back from the film, because what Anderson is showing us is not fiction. It's a pattern that is as old as this country. The state has always used the same operation, the same mechanism, the same trick. They swap the keyword from each targeted population, but the function never changes. For enslaved people, the word was property. Once a human being is property, you don't need to justify what you do to them. The word has already done the moral work. For Native peoples, it was savage. Once they're savages, removal isn't genocide, it's civilizing the country. For Japanese Americans in 1942, it was enemy alien. Once they're enemy aliens, internment isn't a violation of rights, it's now national security. For civil rights activists, it was agitator. Once they're agitators, fire hoses and dogs aren't brutality, they're restoring order. For gay Americans, and I know something about this one personally, the word was deviant. Once you're a deviant, exclusion isn't cruelty, it's restoring morality. For immigrants, now it's illegal. Once a person is illegal, detention isn't imprisonment, it's processing. Each word functions identically. It strips personhood by recategorizing the human being as a problem to be administered. The word sounds like it describes an objective category. It sounds like it's referring to something real, but in practice, it's a weapon deployed by whoever controls the definition of the word. This is what I explored in my first VIYOBI in the film Sinners. Who defined sin in 1932 Mississippi? The church that condemned the blues as the devil's music? Or was it the colonial system that made black joy itself a transgression? In my memoir, Forbidden Friends, the word forbidden traveled 7 generations through my Mormon lineage, from the Puritan settlers to the Utah pioneers to the polygamous Mormons in Alberta to the missionary who stood at a swimming hole in Uruguay in 1979 and could not name what he felt for the boy beside him. Forbidden did the same work as criminal. It categorized a feeling, my feeling, as something that existed outside the protection of the people who loved me. If I acted on it, I would have to give all of that up because it was forbidden. The word did the work. I locked myself in. Nobody had to lock me in. I chose to live locking myself in. It's the same mechanism. It's the same gap between the word and the reality. The same question every time. Who needs you to believe this word means what they say it means? When you answer that question, then you can move on. Now let's talk about the title of Anderson's film, One Battle After Another, because that title itself is the second ideograph, and it works in tandem with the first. Here's the formula. Once the demagogue has turned the target into a criminal, they need a battle to fight against them. Criminal labels the target, battle sanctifies the violence. One creates the enemy, the other justifies the war. Lockjaw isn't conducting an arrest. He's launching a military operation against a karate teacher and some families. But the word battle elevates persecution into heroism. It transforms cruelty into his duty. It makes the man deploying troops against women and children feel like a soldier defending his country. And Anderson embeds this in the visual language of the film. Film critics have noted that the final chase scene, that rolling up and down roads stretching to the horizon, I've been on one very similar to that in California as well by Joshua National Forest. It's a visual metaphor of the title. After you fight one battle, another one is always waiting over the next hill. The demagogue needs you to believe that the next hill is the last battle, that this battle will end the threat, but it never does. There's always another criminal to fight, another battle to wage, and that's the point. The system needs the war to be permanent, because permanent war justifies permanent power. They talked you into giving it up because there's always another threat. Now look at how every character in the film defines battle differently. Lockjaw's battle is institutional domination dressed in a military honored uniform. Bob's battle is just trying to stay alive and raise his kid. Willa's battle is inherited. It's a fight she didn't choose, but she decides to own it. Perfidia's battle was a costume she wore until she didn't need it anymore. Same word, completely different meaning. That's the ideograph at work. So now it's time to teach you a new word, demagogue. The textbook definition is a political leader who gains power by appealing to emotions, fears, and prejudices rather than a rational argument. But that definition is too polite. Let me tell you what a demagogue actually does. A demagogue stacks ideographs. They don't argue with you. They don't present evidence. They don't describe specific crimes committed by specific people. They pile labels on top of labels until the target disappears under the weight of language. Listen to the Christmas adventurers again. Illegals, drug dealers, psychopaths, reefer addicts, wet bodies, criminal organizations. That's 6 labels in roughly 30 seconds of dialogue. Not one of them is supported by evidence. Not one of them describes anything the audience has actually witnessed. But by the time you've heard all 6, the human beings underneath have vanished. You can't see the women and children anymore. You can only see the words. That's the technique. That's what a demagogue does. The tool is fear. They bait you with danger. They need you to feel threatened so that you'll accept authoritarian action, a military raid on a karate studio. That's protection. And notice how Lockjaw pre-neutralizes dissent. We expect the local populace to be sympathetic to the criminals. Before anyone can object, objection itself has been categorized as complicity. If you see human beings where Lockjaw sees criminals, you are now part of the threat. The demagogue closes every exit before you even know you're trapped. Second new word, populist. A populist claims to speak for the people against the elites. That sounds democratic. It sounds like exactly what we should want from our political leaders. But here's the catch. The people is itself an ideograph. Who counts as the people? Who gets excluded? Who gets included? The populist's power comes from drawing that line. You're either with the people or you're one of them, and you have to be excluded. The demagogue's tool is fear. The populist's tool is belonging. They bait you with identity. They need you to feel like part of a tribe so that you will accept exclusion of others as the price of membership. This is what I call an interpretive monopoly. It's a concept from my research. A narrative community forms around a governing story. It's tight. The sustaining institution defends that story from challengers. Adherents who abide by the narrative are the in-group. Nonconformists are shunned as the out-group. The populist's job is to make sure the boundary between the in-group and the out-group is patrolled at all times. They have to be ready to close structural holes in this narrative interpretive monopoly. The Christmas Adventurers Club is pure populism. They see themselves as the real Americans, the rightful inheritors of the nation. Everyone outside the club is a threat. And to the membership screening question, have you ever been engaged in an interracial relationship? That's the line that defines who belongs and who doesn't. And look at Lockjaw. He has fathered a biracial child, so he lies. And when he discovers that the child, Willa, might expose his lie, his response is to try to have her killed, his own daughter, because belonging to the club matters more to him than the life of his child. That's what populism does when it's weaponized. It makes people destroy their own families to maintain membership in a tribe that was designed to exclude the people they love. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. When I came out as gay, not one of my 5 brothers and sisters were willing to take on the narrative because they knew how powerful the narrative was at closing structural holes. So I spent 44 years in a religious system that required me to deny who I loved in order to maintain membership. The word wasn't criminal, it was deviant. But the function was identical: categorize the feeling, exclude the person, demand loyalty to the tribe. Now here's the critical point. The demagogue and the populist work together. They're a double team. The demagogue manufactures the threat. Criminals are at the border. The populist manufactures the identity, real Americans who must defend their way of life. Together they create a closed loop. The threat justifies the tribe, and the tribe demands the threat for its very existence. If you learn nothing else from this episode, learn this. When you see a demagogue and a populist working the same crowd, you are watching a coordinated operation. One is fishing with fear, the other is casting the net of identity, and the catch isn't the criminals, the catch is you. So how do you fight back? You don't dismantle the narrative, you have to displace it. The distinction matters. Dismantling attacks the structure, and the structure fights to stay alive. Every time you try to tear down a demagogue's frame, you reinforce it by giving it the attention that it craves, the fear. The frame gets stronger every time someone argues against it on its own terms. Displacement is different. Displacement builds a competing narrative so compelling that the old one loses its audience. The goal is not to tear down the demagogue's frame. The goal is to make it irrelevant by pushing it out of the way. Those who choose to stay in it get pushed away with it. So this is the second diagram from my research. When a displacing narrative emerges, one that's grounded in evidence and dialogue rather than fear and exclusion, it doesn't destroy the old community. It welcomes the people who are shunned by it. The out group of the old narrative becomes the in group of the new one. And over time, the two communities find an engineered shared premise. And that's the important phrase, an engineered shared premise, something that creates space for a new emergent narrative community, one that builds on inclusion rather than exclusion. So you move away from the narrative monopoly and you carry people with you into this emergent narrative community that comes out on that shared premise. That's not theory, that's strategy. And it's the strategy that every campaign, every political action committee, and every community organization needs to learn. Build the wall. They're sending criminals. Take our country back. These are slogans. They work like ideographs. They compress complex political realities into emotional triggers that bypass critical thinking. A slogan is a weapon. A narrative is a strategy. The difference, a slogan tells you what to feel. A narrative tells you what to do. A slogan creates a reaction. A narrative creates a movement. Every slogan can be converted into a narrative by asking 3 questions. First, who benefits from this word meaning what they say it means? Who is harmed when that happens? And what would it look like if we told the story from the other side? When Lockjaw says criminal organizations, the slogan version is crack down on the crime. That fits on a bumper sticker. It fits in a tweet. It feels ridiculous. That's rage baiting. You're going to click on social media. The narrative version is a military officer is deploying troops against women and children because a secret society of wealthy white men want to preserve racial purity while simultaneously maintaining access to the cheap immigrant labor. Brother Bert Rimhorn wants his workers back, remember? That doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. That's a story. And stories are harder to dismiss than slogans because they have characters, they have stakes, and they have consequences. They have faces. They have children. Remember, I'm not a spoiler here, but that's important. It's different when there's children. They have a karate teacher who calls what he's doing a Latino Harriet Tubman situation because he understands that the fight for immigrant dignity in 2026 is the same fight as the fight against slavery was in 1850. The demagogue wins when you argue about the bumper sticker, when the argument is about immigrants being criminals. The demagogue loses when you tell the whole story. This is where I tell you what I'm building and why. I'm Lester Leavitt. I write speculative fiction that is grounded in political reality. My memoir, Forbidden Friends, is being developed as a university curriculum textbook on semiotics and governing narratives, and I went all the way through a PhD in public administration, 4 major research papers on how ideographs shape policy outcomes. But then I was prevented from defending my dissertation by the same institutional forces that I was studying. I say that not to complain, but so that you understand that when I teach you these concepts, I'm drawing not only on 15 years of academic research, not just punditry, but on a life lived in a process of escaping demagogues and populists. If you hire Driftless Rivers Coalition as a political consultant, you're not getting a talking head. You're getting a researcher, even though I'm a talking head in this video. You're getting a researcher, a narrative strategist, and a curriculum developer who understands the semiotic machinery that demagogues and populists use. And I can teach your team how to displace those narratives. Here's how the ecosystem works. Voteinyourownbestinterest.com. So that's VIYOBI.com. That's the daily video series that you're watching right now. This is the pilot episode. Each episode will identify one ideograph and show you how it's being deployed in real time. This is the awareness layer. You learn to hear the word, you learn to identify it and recognize it. Don'tTakeTheBait.com. That's the training curriculum. This is where campaign managers, political action committee directors, and community organizations learn to convert slogans into narratives. You're saying, aha, there's the ideograph, and this is how I disarm it. So we take the ideographs identified in VIYOBI and teach you the 3-question framework. Don't Take the Bait teaches you who is benefiting, who is being harmed, and what does the story look like from the other side. This is the strategy layer. You learn to fight back with narrative when you learn how to not take the bait of a demagogue or a populist. Silence is betrayal. Now that's the action layer. Because knowing the ideograph isn't enough. Building the narrative isn't enough. At some point, you have to act. Silence is betrayal. Complicity. They want you to be afraid. This is how they closed those structural holes in their interpretive monopoly. They kept you trapped inside because if you fight back, you're part of the problem. So complicity and silence is exactly what they're demanding, and you're acquiescing to it. You're giving in. So silenceisbetrayal.com is the site where the narratives become campaigns, where the strategy becomes organizing, and where the circle completes. One ideograph at a time, we will build a database of governing narratives. Each daily VIYOBI will identify the word. Don't Take the Bait will teach you how to do it yourself, how to convert the slogan into a counter narrative. And Silence is Betrayal puts that narrative into action in our community, your campaign, your coalition. That's the circle. Every episode will complete it. So let's come back to the word criminal. The next time you hear someone stack pejoratives, illegals, drug dealers, psychopaths, wet bodies, criminal organizations, that's not description, that's bait. The demagogue is fishing. The populist is casting the net. And the catch isn't the criminals, it's you, your attention. You clicked. Your fear motivated you. Your vote was against your own self-interest when you really think about it. Your complicity and your silence. The question is never whether people were criminals. That wasn't what they wanted from you. They didn't want you to determine who was criminals. They wanted you to buy into their definition that they get to define criminal. The question is, who needs you to believe they are criminals? But what they're planning to do once you swallow the word. Anderson gave us the visual, a road that rolls up and down, one hill after another, one battle after another. The demagogue needs you to believe the next hill is the last one, that this battle will end the threat, but it never does. There's always another criminal to fight. There's always another word that they're going to load with all of that context so that there will be another battle. We just don't know who the enemy is going to be, but there will always be an enemy, a danger, a fear. So there's going to be another battle. Just count on it. That's by design. Permanent war justifies permanent power. Unless you stop taking the bait. That's semiotics. That's the ideograph. This is what the Driftless Rivers Coalition is here to teach. Don't take the bait. Tell the story. Complete the circle. And always remember, vote in your own best interest.